I'm so boring. You know? I mean, I think that we have this image of artists as these people who are constantly out carousing and drinking.
Jim Morrison.
Yeah, you know, putting themselves into early graves. I am the most routine, boring person. You know, like my days look very, very similar. And so I find that's the, I always like to think that creativity and making art and stuff, it just takes a lot of energy. And you don't have that energy if you waste it on other things. So I find that the more boring my life,
the better the art.
The better the art.
Okay.
I mean, when I mean boring, I mean you sit down in the same place every day and you do the work. You know, so you've got your time, space, and your materials. And so for me, that is, I mean, it's a little bit different for me just because I have depending on what you have going on.
Right.
Like right now I'm writing a book, so I'm actually in the illustration phase right now. So
you're a writer who draws. Am I supposed to
look at you or them, or does it matter?
I think it doesn't matter.
Okay,
I love
good.
the question because
because I feel like I need to talk to you.
Good. Yeah, you talk to yes.
Us.
How would a Texan say y'all, us?
Y'all. You would say all y'all.
There you go. Talk to all y'all.
Right. No, but for me, I mean, it's very simple. It's about having the time, space, and materials, and having a kind of repeatable process. And for me, like very simply, when I'm doing my newspaper blackout work, where I take a marker to the newspaper, this stuff in my first book. Oh, yeah. That's, I've got my stack of newspapers, I've got my markers, I've got my desk, and every day at the same time, I put my kid down for a nap, and I do my little meditation, which we might talk about later.
You should.
And I sit down and I make a poem, and I do that every day. Every day I'm home, anyway.
Wow.
And it's just like, you do one stupid little poem every day, and it doesn't feel like much, like one day it'll suck, one day it'll be really good. But, you do one a day for 365 days, and you've got a book full.
You got a body of work, and
yeah.
You've got this act of sitting down and doing it. I think it was Chuck Close, the famous painter and photographer, who said that if I only did work when I was inspired, I wouldn't have very much work.
Yeah,
and yet
he said,
is unbelievably
he said inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us sit down and get to work. Well, small things get big over time. I mean,
if watered, right? If watered?
if watered, cultivated. Yeah. It was funny the other day, I forget which writer it was. He said, you put a drop in the bucket every day, it doesn't seem like much, but you do it every day for a year and you got some water in it. And then all these smart asses on Twitter were like, no, you wouldn't, it would evaporate. But so I like to think, oh, well, you put one little Lego block. You put your one little Lego block down, then you add another one, and then you just pile it up.
Then you pretty soon you got the Millennium Falcon.
Then exactly, you got your Wonderland or whatever. But yeah, I mean it's small things get big over. The other thing is we're supposed to sit on our work. We're supposed to make the stuff and then sit on it and see if it's good later. And in my experience, I'm not really a great judge of which poems people are actually going to respond to. Like a lot of times when I make a poem, I might think it's kind of crappy. I might just be like, oh, well, this is a toss-up. But you know what? This is the work for today. And I post it, and then that's the one that everyone's like, I need a print of this. I want to hang this on my wall, And so that's the thing you have to understand about the whole process of art or the work that we do, is that you're only half of the equation. I mean, it's an interaction between you and the person that's going to experience the work. And the person that's going to experience the work is bringing just as much to it and is just as important as you are. I mean, we're living in a world right now where you might not even like an artist's work, but there's a hell of a lot to learn from them.
Yep.
So I have a gut check for theft, which is you break down in an elevator with the person you're taking influence from.
You break down as in like,
no, the elevator breaks down.
Okay, good.
And you're in there, do they punch you in the face, or do they say, good job, that's good stuff? Because if you're doing it right, what you're doing is you're taking your influences and you're stealing them, but you're mixing them in with your own, you're not stealing from one, you're stealing from many. There's their great line: if you steal from one author, it's plagiarism. If you steal from 100 authors, it's research. So it's like...
Someone's tweeting that right now.
So, it's very much, what I would err on the side of is how you're studying them. Because I think that, when I was starting out and there were the people that I was, ripping off and incorporating into my style, the way I handled it was I just wrote about their work. And I just wrote about what I found really interesting about it, and tried to share and just give them as much credit as possible. People see the steal and they forget the like an artist part. An artist takes their influences and they turn them into something new. That is the most important part.
That's actually the definition of creativity, right? Taking raw material and refining it and making something. The raw material might be the photographer sitting next to you, might be the writer that has inspired you, might be Melville, might be any sort of thing.
And I would stress the kind of combinatorial aspect of it, which is the more you smash together, the better the reaction gets. So the more influence. That's why it's important not to just study one artist, but to study. I talk in the book. One of the things that really helped me as I was going along is, and it's actually one of my buddies. I asked him. We're a few years out of college, and I said, how are you? Because he didn't go to grad school, and I didn't go to grad school. So when we got out of undergrad, we would email each other and say, so what are you doing? Hey, what are you doing, man? And one of the things he told me, my buddy Brandon Abood, he said, what I'm doing is I'm reading one author's work, and I'm reading everything. So he'd be like, I'm reading Flannery O'Connor or something. And I read everything of hers. And then I figured out who she read. And I read everything of that person. And he was talking about building this kind of family tree. So he would pick one influence that he was really, had a boner for.
He said boner.
Find that person that you're really into, and then you find out who they were into, and then you just move up as far as you can. And what you do that way is you almost get a whole survey of your field, but it's very precise, and you build your own kind of creative lineage. And what happens when you do that is you just have a lot more to pick from. And when you do that, you also see where the style has come from, because I think a lot of people, you don't want to steal the style, you want to steal the thinking behind the style.
Bingo.
You don't want to look like your heroes, you want to see like your heroes.
Bingo.
Yeah, people ask me all the time, why do you have to use the word steal? Why
that was
can't
on
you just say,
my blog and the Facebook and Twitter this morning. I was just like, come on, people.
Why can't you
stealing's bad.
Why can't you just say influence? And I'm like, because I'm not very original. And this whole book, honestly, this book started Steal Like an Artist started as a talk I gave to a community college in upstate New York. And but what the talk came from was, I am a quote collector, kind of like Ryan Holiday, who you had on the show. I keep I kind of keep like a commonplace book type thing like he does, where I collect quotes. That's like a big thing. And I just noticed that I just had this huge file of artists using the word steal. I mean, I just had like 50 to 100 quotes of all these famous people. Woody Allen, and it's not like they're nobodies.
Right.
Woody Allen goes up and says, "I'm a shameless thief. I've stolen from the best." And it's just this long list, and I'm thinking, what's going on here? And that's the kind of pattern recognition that comes from, devouring as much as you possibly can all the time.
We're here.
And that's something that's really misunderstood about the Steal Like an Artist stuff, which is that's what you're trying to get to. by studying, by studying and stealing, you're trying to see what these people didn't do and where the gaps are that you could fill. Oh, wow. Okay. But look what my hands are, but, you're.
Hold those still.
Okay,
Right.
I'm going
no,
to. Sorry, Mom. But, you're looking for the voids to fill with your own work. And that's something that I'm always like, you want to look at your heroes and figure out what didn't they do? Like, or if they all got together and jammed, what would they make?
Yep.
And that's your job. Your job is to do the work that you want to see done.
Yes.
And so for me, a lot of that comes from being a fan. I'm a fan of all this stuff. I would love to see someone, you're like, okay, well, what if this dude got together with this dude and this, and they made something. That's my job.
Yep.
Because I've got them in my head. I've got them in my family tree. I can put them together.
We had an interesting discussion that started last night that I put the brakes on because I wanted to bring it to the couch here today, and that was about verbs. What verbs are you living right now? So can you talk to us about that? I thought that was just a really fascinating concept.
It's just something like I mentioned before. When you talk to a painter is their noun. I'm a painter, But painting is the verb. Like what they do is they paint. And so for me, I think a lot of people want to be the noun without doing the verb. So a lot of people want to be a writer or an author. Author.
Yes.
And
very regal.
But they don't want to actually write. And for me,
that's a problem, actually.
That is a big problem. But also what can happen is when you become a writer, are you still doing the verb? Are you still doing the thing that you really love to do? Because when you become a professional from doing something that you love or some sort of passion, there's a lot of administrative crap that comes with that.
Yes.
Like I could basically there's a difference between, you know this as well as I do. And commercially, actually, business-wise, you could spend the rest of your life probably talking about creativity instead of actually being creative. As much as I want you to buy every book about creativity that I put out,
right.
You can't just read Steal Like an Artist 20 times over and over and over. Right. You got to read it and then you got to go do the things that are in the book. There's a very, I think there's a number, people who buy self-help books are almost guaranteed to buy another self-help book within 18 months. The market knows that. That's real. And it's like, you can't, I forget who said it, but someone was like, you can't just subscribe to a running magazine. You gotta run too, And so, which brings me back to a great line. I heard one of the Williams sisters, not Serena, or what's the other one? I'm sorry. The Williams, the tennis, yeah. So the one who's not famous, there was an article about all those sisters, and she said it's like training an animal. That's what their routine is like. It's like training an animal. And I just thought, I love that. That's like training an animal. You've got to do, and that comes back to you've got to do it every day. You got to have your muscle memory. I'm making some sort of tennis motion here. I don't know what this is. But you gotta, it's like training the animal, and you'll get out of shape. You gotta keep in shape. And that's why someone like Jerry Seinfeld, he doesn't need the money. He doesn't have to do anything other than wax his Porsche, He's out there doing comedy clubs. He's out there staying sharp because he wants to do the work, And to me that's inspirational. It's the people who, I call it chain smoking. They just don't quit. They do one project and they use the end of one to light the other. Woody Allen, he types a screenplay, he goes off and films it. The minute he's done filming it, he writes another screenplay.
On the same typewriter.
The Woody Allen documentary is so good, by the way.
Yeah, it is.
He's used the same typewriter since he was 16.
Brilliant film. So I want to know how you deal with this. I have a lot of inbound communication.
Yeah.
I have an autoresponder set up in my email because I can't possibly do it.
Yeah.
And my particular feeling is that people pay attention to what it is that I'm doing because of the other stuff that I do, not because I'm a great emailer. Yeah. So how do you balance the fact that it's very empowering and exciting and inspirational to communicate with the people that like what you're doing, but at the same time, it is a massive distraction from doing the thing that you see the irony here. So how do you handle that?
This is such an important question. I mean, for me, the gauge is always be as generous as you can and selfish enough to get your work done. And
this guy is just full of it. I mean, it's like
full of
tweet,
it.
tweet,
It's true.
tweet. I mean, full of the
true.
machine. I'm going to call you the quote machine, the soundbite machine.
Well, I'm a writer, man. I sit around and make sentences.
You make
That's my
jingles.
job.
Well,
you know? So
I'm thinking about changing careers. Then this is amazing.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I had my life change, and if you go on my website and just Google the artist who changed my life, I had an artist actually change my life. I wrote to him when I was like 13, and he wrote me back this like 15-page handwritten letter. It's all up on my website. You can see it, and it really changed my life. And that I actually got to meet him on book tour last year.
I saw that photograph of you guys standing there.
Yeah, so like, this is a really. It hits close, it cuts close because my life was really changed by someone sharing their secrets with me and opening up and making me feel like I was someone who could do the work too.
Yep.
That's what the books are for now for me. That's why I write the books. And that's why I'm not so good at checking my email, because if I work hard on the books, that's my letter to you. If I do the books right, they're just like that letter I got when I was 13, and they make, and so I can't answer my email now. When the 15-year-old emails me, you know, I try as much as I can to say thanks and to make that connection, but the books are what is supposed to do that now. And that is just a question of scale.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when I wrote to that artist, luckily, honestly, email wasn't really around.
Yeah.
He didn't have an email, so I had to write I had to do my ransom note font letter and like, you know, doodle and send it to him in the mail, and there was a more human connection there. You know, email's so, I mean, people don't even spell check stuff that they send me. You know what I mean? I mean, everything's just so dashed off. And but I think that's the thing, is like I feel like there's only, again, death and deadlines. And there's only so much we can do, so you just have to maximize what you're doing. And if that means, you know, Neil Gaiman, he talks about, I'm not a professional email responder. Yep. I'm a writer. So all the time I spend answering your email, I could have been doing the thing that you really love about me.
Yeah, it's basically my sort of rote answer whenever I can't get to something.
And I think it's a good one, and it's the only human one we can deal with. I don't think I need to legitimize it. I mean, I think that we're living in a world now where, you know, as Cory Doctorow put it, it's like people ripping you off or piracy or whatever is not your problem, it's obscurity. Like, you want your stuff to just spread. He calls it the dandelion effect. Like, you want your stuff to just be everywhere, you know, and you want it to be copied and, you know,
remixed.
Yeah, you want it to just be everywhere. And I mean, I really agree with Chase is that you just don't know where these people are going to come from, because a lot of them just come as fans.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, the way I met my agent, I have friends that have him as an agent, but the way I initially made the connection with him and asked him to help me turn Steel into a book was he tweeted about my stuff. He just saw it somewhere, and he was just like, wow, this is a really great list. I mean, you know, the funny thing is, in all the research on Steel Like an Artist, I never found any evidence that Picasso ever said.
Got it.
That I did. It was T.S. Eliot.
Good artists copy, great artists steal.
Yeah, I know T.S. Eliot said, you know, bad poets copy, you know, great poets steal. And the thing I love, the reason the book starts with the T.S. Eliot quote is the thing he says that's so important that everyone forgets is like the good artist, you know, he welds his theft into a thing which is completely different. He takes these things, but then he transforms it into something of his own, and that's the like an artist part, you know, because a lot of people hear the steal part. Oh, cool, it's good for I'm gonna steal stuff and copy. And no, I mean, you know, the book is really about the ethos of, you know, you take things from the culture around you and you borrow these little bits and pieces, but you're like George Lucas, you know, you rip off Westerns, you rip off Kurosawa, you rip off Flash Gordon, and then you make Star Wars. And Star Wars is this thing that like comes out into the culture and like really, you know, I mean, it changes everything, right? He's adding, so like, you know, Still Like an Artist was about starting out as a student, like George Lucas was.
Yep.
You know, you start out as a student and then you pay tribute or homage to these people who have influenced you. And the way that you flatter them is not through imitation, but it's through transformation. You make it into your own thing. Right. You steal from one author, it's plagiarism. You steal from 100 authors, it's research. And Elizabeth Gilbert gave this TED Talk. It was after Eat, Pray, Love. And I don't know a lot about her, but I loved this TED Talk so much. She just got up and she was just like, it's very possible my best work is behind me. I'm like 40 years old. I probably got like another 40 years.
She sold 1 million books.
Yeah, it's very possible this is it. But like, I love this thing. I have to keep going. And what she talked about in terms of genius was kind of the old school Greek way of thinking about genius, which is genius was like more like the muse. It was something that visited you. That you weren't a genius, but you had a genius. You had something that like
I love
visited.
the distinction. I love the distinction.
And to bring it back around to the Tom Waits thing, the way your genius visits you is that you sit in a certain place at a certain time every day, or you do some sort of activity and you let that in, right? And that's where your practice comes in. That's holding the camera every day. That's playing the cello every day.
That's the 28 to make thing, doing this exercise, the daily praxis of putting something out.